Folks, what we're tying here is a rabbit hex, otherwise known as the ginger wiggle hex. We can tie this a few different ways. What we like to do is we try and start with the tail. Again, this is going to be your zonker strip. This is a ginger color. You're going to want to stay with the creams here. We tend to do a lot better on the lighter colors versus the naturals. I think more because the natural colors don't really stand out in the water as much as like these creamy colors. A lot of the fish in the Pere Marquette get very adjusted to, especially over the winter months, to feeding on flesh patterns. So anything that's got any type of ginger, cream, any type of maybe even some pale yellows, some dirty yellows, these kinds of colors represent a lot of pieces of rotten flesh that are coming down through the river, and that's pretty much just floating protein for fish. They will take advantage of these, especially in the winter months when the food is scarce, and they don't like to spend a lot of energy feeding. They just kind of like their stuff to kind of float down to them, and that's just about all a piece of salmon flesh would do. Now, the rabbit hex is, again, called a rabbit hex for a reason because it tends to kind of get a gilly effect to it. As you can see, after you tie in your tail here, you leave some of the long barbs out, but on the top here, you'll give it a little snip. And what this does is it kind of makes your rabbit undulate and give it a gilly effect. This gilly effect approximately makes the bug look like it's swimming versus crawling, and that's what a hex does. A hex is a wiggler. It has as many gills and fins on it as it does any legs. So having the more machined look on this is not what you're going for. You're going for a very buggy and loose look. You're going to start with your tail, and then we're going to go for our wing casing here. You can use anything from pheasant tail. Another great material would be like a peacock herl. In the natural greens, I've tried some other purples and dark blues and stuff like that, but they seem to like the green tint on that. But right here we're using the pheasant tail, which is the most natural of the two. Most of the time when you're fishing nymphs, the water will be extremely clear. Nymphs work best when the fish are the finickiest, if that's such a word. When the fish get finicky, they kind of drop off the shiny, bright eggs that are typically what they're interested in that time of year, and they fall back to more of a basic trout diet, which is bugs, insects, pheasant tails, mayfly nymphs, stonefly nymphs. They will see some hex nymphs, but not as many in the upper sections where you'll find a lot of the spring fish focusing their attention. We'll start here. This is a basic soft hackle. This is a grizzly brown. Now, the key to getting this fly just right, again, is back to the gill notion, which says we want to use a piece of this feather that isn't so much the leggy one, because when you bend this right here, you'll see that these materials have more of a very machined look to them. They're sparse, they can be spread, versus this one, they're almost kind of gilly. They're fluent and they're kind of feathery. They don't have a whole lot of stand-up to them whatsoever. We're going to tie this in maybe an inch back behind what we call the plume. The plume is this, that lighter kind of feathery downward, I guess it would be just plume right there. And we're going to tie that in right in front of our wing case. Give that about 4 or 5 wraps just to snug it up a little, give it a little pop. You should use your scissors there. Tie this in, and this again can be loose. These don't have to be perfectly spread down. Having a few loose legs, and the other nice thing is the dubbing will clean up a lot of this. To the dubbing we go, and again we're going to stick with that cream idea. We're going to try and keep it on the spectrum of the fleshy look, the look of a piece of salmon bit that's been laying in maybe a sandbar for upwards of a few months, and then breaks loose after a certain current of water and just begins floating down. And it's free protein for whoever who grabs it first. Now this dubbing is a seal cream. You can really use just about any kind of cream or yellow or even into the oranges, the light pale oranges you could even get into for doing your hex bodies. But you do want a material when you're fishing for the steelhead that is a little bit synthetic, something that just, it doesn't have a lot of sparkle, but if nothing else underwater, it looks like it's getting a little bit more of a kind of a lustrous, wet look to it. And that's why I think this seal works kind of good. finish this up by just stacking all that up there, clean it up. And again, perfection is not a must on this. Just a good loose wrap, tie it down, and now we're going to take our hackle. We're not going to use a ton of this. We're just going to use enough that we can get up to that little bit of the forward here. Here's our first wrap. This is the only leg material we're going to have is that first wrap. As you can see, this material here will be very different from the materials to follow, which are right here. And this is the plume. You can see that it really busts out. It's a very thin and very undulant, and that's a great word to remember when you're tying hexes. Undulant material, something that swims, something that moves with the current by itself and is not machined or hard and sits there and does nothing. Once we get this in, we're going to tie it down, snug it up just a little bit. And we've got a bit of a messy hackle here, but again, folks, that's kind of what we're going for. We're going to tie down in the front. So we've got our wing case held back here, hackle tied in, a nice base for the dubbing here. And now we're going to move for our eyes. Now, a lot of people choose various eyes for doing nymphs. Some people like big, like doll eyes. Some people like the bee chain eyes. I like taking like a colored monofilament and burning either end with a candle to get the prescribed smallness that a bug's eyes actually are. If you've taken the time to add the eye effect to a bug, you might as well match it to the right one. Now, if you can see this, this is just the tiniest little eyeball here. What you've got here is a piece of black mono with some burnt ends, but it looks so much like a set of eyes for an insect. We're going to come up here to the top of our hackle. We're going to do a figure 8 setup for this, which would be the equivalent to tying in any of your maybe wings on a dry fly or something. We're just going to figure 8 just a few times, just to snug it in. And that's good. Finish off the front. Now we're going to take, and when you're doing your wing case spread, you're going to want to part your hackle just a bit, just to get a nice flared effect on either side of the fly. So what we do here is we make sure that the feathers here are nice and plumed out and they've got their stack, and then we're going to spread them apart like parting your hair in 3rd grade, and boom, right over the top. Cinch it down up here on the forward. We're going to get that nice and locked down. You want to try and stay away from the eyes because the eyes are a nice effect. So whenever you can kind of keep the wing case from covering them up, that's what you want to do. Wing cases should be very thin on a bug like this. They're a very small set of eyes for a bug this size. I spin the bottom here. This strengthens any 6/0, 3/0, 8/0, anything that you're using. It actually makes it stronger. It makes it spin, and when you spin it on for a whip finish, it's twice as strong as it was before you did it. It's a great way to get that extra insurance on your heads without going to an epoxy. Again, whip finishing is something you can do with either this or you can do it with your fingers, of course. A lot of people prefer the old school. And there we go. There's our wiggle hex. Now we're not quite done here. We're going to take this, and as you can see, there's a lot of material around this hook. And all we're trying to do here is, for the gild effect, is we're trying to have this undulate in the back and these flare on the side as gills. So we're going to take and have our gills on the side. Oop, have our gills on the side, but then we're going to pluck out the center here, right about there, just so we can get to that nice seal cream dubbing that we spent so much time putting in there. And now you've got a bug that's got not only gills, but it's got those added legs that we said that we added right in the beginning. So you're going to pull out just some of the fiber just to thin it out so it'll look like it's swimming. Low currents, fast currents, it really doesn't matter. This bug here is going to work in all of them because you've got a tail that will undulate in a quicker scenario with these lighter feathers undulating with your breath. I mean, these are very, very sensitive plumes on the end here. This is your basic Pure Marquette wiggle hex right here, folks.